Hello, board gamers over the world, and welcome again to the Curious Box. Today we are showing you the first episode of our new show, The Other Side, where we'll be talking with several personalities connected to board games. And today I wanted to start this segment with a person that I've been following for a long time on YouTube. He was on the Dice Tower. He now has his own channel called The Flip Side of Board Games. Here's Sam Healy. Hi, Sam.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Pedro.
Thank you for finding the time. We tried this several times already, and
Yeah.
it's finally happening.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's
Sam,
cool.
we all know you, or most of us know you from the Dice Tower, from
Yeah.
the time you have been there. But I will
Yes.
start this conversation, and I will tell you that I'm focusing these videos on um, more than just the games. I want to know the other side of the
Sure.
person with whom I'm talking, and what is this that connects us all to the board games and to make us like board games so much. So
Yeah.
I want to know about your origins. Where do you come from, and
Okay.
what's your path until you start playing board games?
Okay. Well, to start it off, I mean, my origins. My dad was in the United States Air Force. So we did a lot of moving around as a kid. I was born in San Antonio, Texas, and I was almost born in Okinawa, but my mom
Wow.
had complications, and she had to be medevaced back to the states so that she could get proper medical treatment. So I was born in San Antonio, Texas, and that's where I was raised for most of my most of my childhood, I guess you could say. I did spend 3 years in Virginia, and that was during my first, second, and third grade years. And then after that, we moved back to Texas, and I spent a few more years there. And then after that, we went to my dad got stationed. Well, hmm, my mom passed away when I was 10, and after that, he got remarried, and about 6 months after that, then we moved to Germany, where I spent about 4 years, and then after that, we moved back to the states in the Gulf Coast area of Mississippi, and I spent my high school years in Mississippi and Alabama. And after I graduated high school, moved back to Texas and lived with my grandparents for a few years. Actually, broke my leg playing softball for my church, and moved back to my dad's place because I couldn't work. So I couldn't. I was just basically a draw on my grandparents' economy. So we decided moving back to my dad's place was the best thing to do. From there, went to started looking at what colleges I was going to go to. Decided on Pensacola Christian in Florida, and that's where I went to finish my schooling. I had already taken some college courses at that point, but that's where I finished my college. That's where I met Tom. That's where our friendship began, and from there on, I mean, up to that point, my my involvement in board gaming, I don't think was any more than I think anybody else's at that point. I played, checkers and chess, and the family would bring out a Monopoly version every once in a while, and we'd play that. And I remember as a really small kid, games like Hi Ho Cherry-O and Trivial Pursuit and all of those kinds of things. But when I met Tom and in college, we started playing the Decipher Star Wars CCG that was going back then. And we also, well, he and some of our friends got into Pokemon. I never really got into Pokemon, but we also played the BattleTech CCG. We played a little bit of the Magic the Gathering as well. But from there, we started playing more of the board game versions of uh, that were popular at that time. You know, we played a lot of Samurai Swords and um, those kinds of mass market uh, conflict games. But after we moved over to, we both separately moved to Korea at different points. He went about a year earlier, and than I did. And when we got over there, it was a pretty close knit group of teachers, and so we kind of always did things together. And so we started playing a lot of board games at that point. Risk 2210 AD, Sid Meier's Civilization. Those were board games that we kind of played early on. Twilight Imperium, I think at that point it was second edition. Maybe we didn't play that until third edition. I can't really remember, but I'm pretty sure we played second edition once, and then third edition came out right after that. So that's kind of, I don't think I had very much more of a dive into board games until I really got into college, and it really started with the collectible card game scene with BattleTech and Star Wars, but it really didn't start clicking until we were both in Korea and we were both kind of seeing this new phenomenon. We started seeing board game cafes in Korea where you could actually go and sit down and they had games that you could play for them. So that was really kind of the first deep dive into board games that we had, and we kind of did that together. But it was a little bit with Tom's lead. Tom was always a pioneer, a leader in that, right? So we were all just kind of hanging out together, and that's what Tom wanted to do. So that's what we all did, and we all enjoyed it.
How did Korea happen in your life?
Well, generally speaking, uh, Tom's Tom's wife's parents, so Tom's in-laws,
Okay.
ran a an English language institute that basically taught kindergartners through high school aged kids how to speak English. And they did that as a missionary outreach, and they needed new teachers, and because the demand was high, but there weren't a whole lot of teachers, and so uh, Tom answered that call first because of several things that were going on in his life. It just kind of corralled him down that road. And then after they had been there for a year, and we kept in touch with him, of course, over that year, and he kept remarking about how they needed new teachers and how it was a good experience, and going to live in another country and experiencing that culture and that kind of stuff. But after that year, I was about to graduate from college, and so that was one of the requirements for teaching English another language in a foreign country, was that you had to have at least a college degree. And so I was about to graduate, and it was December 2020. No, that was December 2001. I almost said 2021. It was 2001. And our first, we landed January 2020, 2002. And that's pretty much it. They needed teachers, and um, we were willing to go over there and check it out and do what we could.
Really, really nice.
Mm.
Um, so this was already more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when did you start playing board games? Like 1995, something like that, or even before that?
I graduated from high school in 1992 and bounced around for a couple of years, going to live with my grandparents and then going back to live with my dad until about 93, about 94, 94, spring of 94, I think is when I got down there. And and I met Tom that semester, and we were on the same hall. We were both summer work students, which basically when you for that college they had a work program, and you could work during the summers full time for the college, doing odds and ends. They had a number of different things going on during the summers and on the winter breaks and stuff like that. And you could work for the college during the summers, and then during the semesters you would also work. For one full year, you'd work full time, but then after that, during the semesters, you'd work part time and go to classes full time. And basically, the idea was is at the end of your college career, you're debt free, and you've basically worked your way through college. And so we were both in that program, and so we spent more time together than the rest of my classmates, because my rest of my classmates would go back. Would go back home on summer break and winter break, and of course us and the rest of the contract students would still be there working. And so there was a little bit that's where the friendship kind of forged. So yeah, it's probably around 94, 95 when I really started playing board games on a more hobby level rather than just an eventual um, type experience.
Then you eventually started teaching English history and Bible, as you told me before this interview started. I
Yes.
have a question. Since I was also teaching for some time. I was
Yeah.
teaching board games actually in schools,
Oh,
in
cool.
public schools here. Yeah. But my question is, have you ever used board games for teaching?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. We would use, since I was a U.S. history teacher, there were a lot of opportunities to use board games in a number of different ways. Other history teachers that I've known have also used board games in a lot of different ways in order to kind of put the students in the situations that a lot of those historical contexts provide. A lot of them, a lot of the U.S. history things that we taught, it wasn't all about military history, but it was definitely framed in military history, if that makes any sense. So, I was able to use games like Memoir 44 and Battle Cry to kind of give the students an idea of the kinds of decisions that the field generals and the leaders had to make during those battles, so that they can kind of internalize the idea of what war is like and how difficult it can be. Now, of course, you're trying to pull very deep psychological truths out of a board game, and that's not exactly easy to do, but at least it gives them an idea of what it would be like. And so I've personally used those games. We also used, well, I didn't, but Tom, when he taught statistics and probabilities and stuff like that, he would use a number of the different games that were based on like elections
Mhm.
and stuff like that to show those kinds of things. So he used those games in his math classes. I used different kinds of games in my history classes. There are also some Christian themed board games that I was able to use a couple of times, not prolifically, but a couple of times in my Bible classes as well. So yes, the answer is shortly. Of course, the answer is yes, but there, I think I only, it was I think I only touched the tip of the iceberg as far as it's concerned. I know there's a lot of different people that I've talked to over the years that have gone much further down that road than I ever did.
Have you taught after Korea also in the US?
Yes. Yeah, when I came back, I was first of all worked for as an assistant pastor at a church in California, in the East San Francisco Bay Area. That lasted for a year, and then I got a job working at a private school in Homestead, the same one that Tom worked for. Um, we both individually or separately um, applied to work at the same school without us knowing it. We didn't know until we were maybe 4 or 5 calls into the hiring process that we were both applying for the same place. That was an interesting thing, but we both worked for the same school there, and we taught. Like I said, I taught U.S. history and Bible, and Tom taught math, and that was from 2010 to about 2016 that we both did that, and then in 2016 I went on full time with the Dice Tower, and for about 3 years, almost 4 years, I was full time with the Dice Tower.
What are the main differences between teaching in Korea and in the US? But I mean, what differences can you find in schools, in students? I don't know.
Right. Well, the differences in students, I think, is a little bit of a stereotype, but there is a lot of truth to the stereotype. Um, the Korean students were much more, not all of them, but I would say most of them were more concerned with getting better grades and understanding the the curricula and the courses that and everything that was being offered in them. Uh, m- m- Much fewer students in on the American side are they were more. I don't want to say that they were worse students because that's not a correct summation. It's just that the values over here in America are different than they are over in Korea. Korea is very much a they value very highly education, and it is a very important thing. It would not be uncommon for a Korean student to come to our school at say 8 o'clock in the morning, but at that point they had already been at a language institute or some other kind of institute for a couple of hours before they actually got to school at our school. And then after they left our school, they would spend another couple of hours or even more studying at other language institutes or other subject institutes. For example, they go to taekwondo, or they go to a soccer institute, or they go to an English language institute, or Japanese or German, or whatever you might say. And there were students that I personally knew that probably slept 4 or 5 hours a day, and the rest of those hours were spent in some kind of school-based activity, whether it was curricular or extracurricular activity. Um, so it's a completely different mindset. So it's really hard to compare the two. The differences, however, are rather stark. You have a much more type experiential type context here in America, whereas I think in Korea and other countries, it's much more scholastic. It's much more based on what you're learning and putting into practice what you're learning.
Very well. And then you went to Dice Tower. Okay.
Yeah.
Since the beginning, since you were there part time until the end, for how many years have you been on Dice Tower?
Well, I started doing the podcast first, and that was when we were still in Korea. Tom and our friend Joe Stedman started the Dice Tower podcast about a year before I really became involved with it. And then Joe left Korea to come back to the States. And um, since Tom was down a co-host at that point, I just kind of fell into that position, and I was there for I think 100 episodes or maybe it was 150. I can't remember exactly. It was somewhere in there. But from, I'm going to say, ugh, let's see, I left Korea in 2009. So I'm going to say around 2007, 2008 is when I started doing the podcast with Tom. And then I still kept doing stuff with him or for him, off and on until 2016, 2015, 2016, when I actually came on full time. And then I left the Dice Tower at December 2019. So altogether, you're looking at probably almost almost 2 decades that I was
Oh,
doing the
wow.
Dice Tower. But again, that's half of that. Well, actually, more than half of that is just it's just like a hobby level stuff, dropping in every once in a while. Tom put an incredible amount of work into, much more than I ever did, into a lot of. I mean, it was all him splicing all of the audio together for the podcast there at the beginning. And I just showed up and brought my list with me and and provided my input on the stuff that he came up with, all of the different subjects and topics, and he was the one that was dealing with all of the different contributors that were putting into the podcast at that point. One of the conventions we went to, it was Origins, as a matter of fact, way back when, and we were part of a panel, and this was the first experience for me. It was the first panel I think I'd ever been in at a convention, and somebody asked, "What's the best way to get into podcasting?" And just off the hip, I said, "Know somebody that's doing a podcast, or be best friends with somebody that's doing a podcast. That's the best way to do it, because that's what I did." So that's kind of how it is, though. And I don't, and that's one of the reasons I don't cease to give him props, because he's put so much time and effort into, um, what is, I think, one of the most relevant board game channels that's in existence right now. So, he's got a lot of people working for him now, but he wouldn't be where he was today unless he had put his nose to the grindstone for so long. So I can't take credit for any of that. I can just say, hey, I was part of that. Cool.
Do you realize after 2 decades you left the Dice Tower right before the lockdown,
Yep.
and
Right.
so you are guilty of leaving us orphans from Sam Healy on the Dice Tower during this really hard and
Yeah.
uh, stuck at home period.
Yeah, I know, right? It's really kind of surreal, because one of the reasons that, um, and of course not the only reason. There are more reasons, but one of the reasons that I left was because I had to move. And back then, working remotely wasn't really a thing. Um, and and so because that was before everybody was locked down. That's before everybody was stuck at home. That's before all of that. So working remotely, that's not gonna be the same. It's not gonna be anything like that. And it's gonna be, so the decision was made. I have to leave, and I have to kind of step down and that kind of thing. So I've thought more than once, how would things have been different had I had waited 6 months to move away, or even just a couple of months, because I left in 2019 December, and I mean, pandemic
My,
hit really in force March the next year,
yeah.
in 2020, and really kind of the end of February is where it really kind of started gaining some traction. So if I'd have just waited a couple months, maybe things would have been different. Maybe they wouldn't have been. I don't know. But those kinds of things that I ponder every once in a while. I don't have any regrets, of course, but I do wonder every once in a while, would things have been different had I just waited a couple of months and
Now we are all wondering. We, we
right.
realize that.
Yeah, no, it's I do. I ponder that every once in a while, but it is what it is, and I don't mean to say that flippantly. I think the Dice Tower is doing superbly well without me, and I know that people tell me that they miss my input and all of that kind of stuff, and I certainly appreciate that as well. I don't take any of that flippantly either because I appreciate it, but at the same time, I think they're rocking it even without me being around, and I think they're doing a great job still.
Have you always felt comfortable talking about board games? I mean, there's a difference between you and me talking while drinking something,
Mm,
or in a cafe, or doing it on a podcast, or even more different on a YouTube channel.
sure.
What differences have you found? Uh, the biggest ones or the hardest ones? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, for me, I think the hardest thing to get past initially was trying to get into a mode where I knew I was talking to people and not just the camera that I'm staring into. That was probably the hardest transition for me to make because when I'm talking to a person, I'm I'm using a lot of different things that we all use. We just don't maybe realize it, but I'm using their body language. I'm using their facial expressions. I'm using um, their responses to what I'm saying, whether they're verbal or nonverbal, as part of how I'm communicating. But when you're talking to a camera, you don't have any of that. So I think one of the hardest things to do is you're talking about board games is to and it seems like it might be easy, but it really isn't. And that is just trying to remain conversational as you're talking about the game that's in question when there's nobody else that you're conversating with in the room. That's the hardest thing for me. And I've noticed other people that I've tried to include that when we talk about board games, as you said, in kind of like a more casual type atmosphere where it's just me and them and a game and the banter and the personalities are just they just fly. But then you put that person in front of a camera and they become very reserved. And it's that barrier almost that makes it difficult for people to cross because they have to kind of teach themselves how to communicate in a different way almost because you don't have a lot of those markers that you usually try to rely upon to see are they understanding what I'm saying? Do I need to say it differently? Do I need to maybe start over? Those all those kinds of things. So I would say probably the hardest thing for me was simply learning, or rather teaching myself how to talk into a camera. And some of that was trial and error. Some of it was watching other people. And I watched a lot of videos that Tom did, watched a lot of the videos that Z did, watched a lot of videos that other people like Rado and back in the day, Draken Strike, those kinds of people, listening to their voices. Some of them weren't doing videos yet, and Rado was another one. Um, just so that you can see how other people do it, so that you can kind of learn from that, but then make it your own as well. Because you don't want 10 Tom Basils doing the same thing. You don't want 10 Rados doing the same thing. You don't want 10 Rodney Smiths doing the same thing. You want all of those personalities to come out. But how you do that is a process, and that was probably the hardest part for me.
Would you agree? And now this question just came to me, to my mind now. Would you agree, especially during the videos you did with Tom and Z, the
Mhm.
live ones and the other ones, the top ones, and so on?
Yeah.
Um, would you agree with the following description? Tom would be the host, the main one. Z would be the funny one, and you would be the unexpected one.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate summation. Yeah, Tom is usually the host, and well, more often than not, he was the host of the videos that we were doing. It was his channel, so he
Mhm.
definitely fell into that category. Yes, and Z is absolutely very comical, very funny, and he and a lot of that is something that's part of his profession. He is actually he went to school to be a stage actor, and he was an actor by profession and by trade. And so his ability to command the comedic part of our videos made it very easy for Tom and I to riff off of that. And so I think really a lot of the comedy that comes from watching those videos was in very large part based upon his, and that is Z's command of being able to draw that out, and his wit is just was just amazing. So I think in that right, he made both Tom and I look uh, much more funnier than we actually are. I mean, you get Tom and I together, and we'll make each other crack up all the time. But I think Z's presence there is really what kind of pulled the other two of us along with him, and it really was one of those synergistic masterpieces that just kind of happened naturally. There wasn't, we didn't script anything. We often didn't even communicate what our lists were to the other two. So all of those reactions that you see and all of those different quips and witty remarks that come up, those were all, in the moment. They were not scripted. So every once in a while we would have technical difficulties, and we would have to reshoot a segment of the top 10 or something like that, and we tried to replicate it, and it never came out as good as it did the first time, and that's
It
kind of a
never
bummer.
does. It
Yeah, it
never
never
does.
does. But I think yeah, it's just amazing how yes, I would usually the way I interpret things often is very eccentric, and that definitely comes out in those videos, because I would interpret something much differently than Tom or Z interpreted it, and sometimes there would be differences between how Tom and Z interpreted the topic that we were doing a top 10 of.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
But I was usually, yeah, the one that was out there the most. On the flip side, upside down and backwards. That's how we do things.
I think at some point we were all expecting, because they were talking and we were all expecting that sentence, just one sentence that you were keeping for the right moment. And it seemed like everything the other ones were building would be destroyed just by this
Well,
by
there
this
is
sentence.
there is something to that. Yeah, there were times where I would just be listening to them talk, and I was thinking of something to say, and I was just waiting for them to stop talking so that I could say it. There were definitely times that happened, but often, um, and there we had barriers. We had a construct of we where we didn't want to venture off into saying things that were mean or whatever. But for the most part, the things that we said are just things that came to mind in the moment. So they were very real. They were very unscripted uh, situations, and the fact that they've come out to be, I guess, so well enjoyed by people, I think is a testament to how it wasn't contrived, it wasn't scripted or anything like that. It was just three guys who were friends talking about a combined and shared hobby that they all had a passion for.
And in the end, because the channel became so big, so huge, do you realize, and I'm sure you realize, a lot of people were influenced by your opinions and on the games,
Mm.
because at least with me, it happened a lot, and I'm sure it happens with a lot of people still today.
Yeah,
When we see this game and we are attracted to some game and we are checking some review or some gameplay and the final thoughts in the end,
right.
um, the first the first ones or one of the first channels every time was to check was the dice tower.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that. I think one of the things that was such a cool thing about the Dice Tower is that you had so many different layers of opinions. It wasn't just, that, it was kind of like a the Venn diagram that we had together is really, I think, where because we did have a lot of overlap. The overlap between Z and I, and the overlap between Tom and I, and then their overlap between the other two. That overlap is really where I think it really sung. So if you had a game that we all three liked, or even just two of us really liked, you kind of had the idea that because of Z's background, because of Tom's background, and because of my background, if we coincided on liking a game, you're that's a pretty good bet that it's gonna be a solid purchase. Will you like it as much as any one of the three of us? Maybe not, but at the very least, it would be a solid purchase, and you wouldn't lose money on it. So I think that's really kind of the draw, and because you had three guys whose tastes were not really completely aligned with one another.
mhm,
We really had our own niches, so to speak, on the games that we truly enjoyed, and so the draw to the channel was such that um, we each drew our own audience, so to speak, of people that enjoyed the same kind of games that we did. But on top of that, we also drew in a group of people that just wanted to find the consensus, and that was, I think, one of the best things about the Dice Tower, and still is, because you still have a whole lot of different tastes and a whole lot of different opinions that are being offered, and it still has that draw, and really even more than we did back in the day. So that's why I think it continues to flourish and it continues to do well. So it's very hard to be a one man show, and I think Tom did it well. Tom did it well. Don't get me wrong, but it's not easy because people value um, comparisons, contrasts, and when you have one or two or three or even four or five different opinions being offered, that's where I think it really sings and where people can really get the most out of those videos. It's one of the reasons why I have my wife on all the time because I enjoy doing things with her, and she enjoys doing things with me. But her opinion matters. I have my buddy JT on because his opinion matters. And I try to have people from my game group on, and friends of ours on whenever we can, so because their opinion matters too. So it's that smattering of different opinions that I'm chasing after, and right now I'm really too small to be able to accomplish it well, but it's still the goal, because people want to have not variance, but I guess diversion
mhm.
of opinions, so that they can really kind of take all of that information and more easily deduce what they think they should be buying for themselves.
Is there is there a game or yeah, for sure there's more than one, but one that you remember, like that you always remember, like that you personally have talked about, probably a game that wasn't so well known, and
Mm.
after you talked about it, um, it got discovered or more
Mm,
well known. Some, I don't know, obscure game or something like
sure.
that.
I the only one, and we didn't know it at the time. We only kind of found out about this after the fact. But I think the one game that comes to mind where I believe I may be remembering things a little bit hazy. They say that two things happen when you start getting older. They say that the first thing uh, that goes is your memory, and I can't remember what the other thing is. So no, that's a bad American joke. But anyway, um, uh, the one game that if I remember correctly, the one game that I remember that kind of happening to is Jamaica from GameWorks. Back when Tom and I originally started talking about it, it was doing well, but after the Dice Tower started talking about it, and I think not just Tom and I, but I think if I remember correctly, again, a number of contributors on the Dice Tower podcast were also talking about how much they enjoyed Jamaica, and it really kind of blossomed after that. So that's the one game that I kind of remember really kind of blossoming as a result of it being showcased on the Dice Tower proper. Um, I've had a lot of people come to me and tell me that they bought Memoir 44 because of how much I've talked about it in the past and how much I've showcased it and that kind of thing. And it's just stories about, like, a father purchasing it because he believed that his daughter or his son would do well with it and enjoy it, and turns out that they did, and they play it every Saturday. Those kinds of stories, and those are all great to hear. Not really from a corporate standpoint, but from a community standpoint. I really enjoy hearing those kinds of stories because that's where the rubber meets the road as far as I'm concerned. It's not so much making a buck, but it's about hearing about relationships that are deepened uh, and grow because of they took my advice and said, hey, maybe this will work with my family too, like it worked for his, or something to that effect. So I get a lot of that about Memoir, but the first game I think that we really um, got that feeling on was Jamaica. I remember that being a big thing.
Is there, just to close the Dice Tower chapter, is there a game or two games or whatever you want to say that you will always, until the end of your life, thank Z Garcia and Tom Vessel by showing you?
Wow. Well, I think for Tom, it was Twilight Imperium, and again, like I said earlier, I think it was second edition that we played first, and I just remember loving this game. And like normal, he cornered off an entire day, had me and I think five other guys over. Well, four other guys, because it was me and him, and four other guys. So it was a six-player game, and we just had a blast the entire day. And so I think Twilight Imperium is the one game that I'll always thank Tom for showing me early on in the day. For Z, um, I think it was not really necessarily a game, but it was his love of Bruno Cathala games, and really kind of turned me on to Bruno Cathala and his designs. And I have since enjoyed a lot of them. Now, I enjoyed Shadows over Camelot before I ever met Z, so it wasn't like I didn't know about Bruno Cathala, but his love of Bruno Cathala really kind of made me pay attention, I guess, a little bit more to Bruno's work, and that has given me a lot of other games that maybe I wouldn't have um, enjoyed as much as I would have before. So it wasn't really a specific game with Z. It was more of a designer.
Very well. And after the Dice Tower,
Yeah.
you open a new channel,
Yeah.
the flip
Yep.
side of board games. Tell me about
Yeah.
it.
Well, it was a couple of years after I moved up here. When I first moved up to Washington State and left the Dice Tower, I was working for Mythic Games as their um, community. the U.S. community director. So I was, interacting with our customers and talking with them and that kind of stuff, and doing content creation and so forth, and that lasted for up until 2022. So, and then after that, there was about 3 months after uh, after that. I was just doing some freelance work. Worked with uh, Dized, the gaming tutorial app. Worked for those guys by contract at Gen Con 2022. And then at Gen Con 22, I got offered a position to work with Monster Fight Club. And then that worked for them until about April of 2023. And then in May 2023, this year, I started the flip side. And I've got, I think it's 200, just over 200 videos up since May, and some of those are shorts, so that's not really a number to say anything other than I've just kind of been trying to stick to it,
Mhm.
and I've been treating it as my full time position. It's definitely not bringing in full time cash yet, but it's growing. It's steadily growing, and I can't expect too much, right off the bat. And I've experienced a lot more growth than a lot of other people do, and a lot of that, I think, in part, at least, is because people have they followed me while I was with the Dice Tower. So again, I have to give props to them for the exposure that they gave me back then, and I think that's at the very least part of my success right now with the flip side. And that's not to say that I've arrived or anything like that, because I certainly don't feel like I have. But the kind of growth that my channel has seen has definitely been different from that. And it's, I don't have viral videos. I don't have any of those kinds of things where, you wake up one morning and you've got 1 million subscribers or 1 million views on your video. I don't, I don't do that kind of stuff. It's much more down to earth, much more boots on the ground type feel. So uh, the slow progressive growth that the channel has seen is really what I want. Um, I wouldn't mind getting a viral video, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not worried about it. I'll put it that way. I'd much rather just kind of keep my nose to the grindstone and keep moving forward, and that's what we're doing.
I will leave a link on the description of this video to
Thank
your
you.
channel.
I
So
appreciate that.
maybe the 4 people who watch my channel, they will uh,
I think there's
eventually
probably more
subscribe.
than that. Come on
Maybe. What do you feel are the biggest differences between doing videos now in these formats
now.
to the videos that you were doing on Dice Tower?
Well, I think now there are many more people doing videos. I think it's become a little bit easier to do videos because now you can simply use your phone, and it's not that you couldn't back then, but uh, largely when Tom first started making videos, the cameras that were on your phones were nowhere near as good as they are now. I mean, night and day almost. So in that right, from a technological point of view, I think it's easier to make a video, just generally speaking, foundationally speaking, than it was back then. Now, to make what's considered a good video, the bar for that has also climbed astronomically, because it used to be, what was a good video back then? Well, there weren't as many videos out there. So, what was considered a good video, the bar was a lot lower. I think that bar is a lot higher now because you have so many people that are able to do, um, they're able to make videos now, whereas before it was a little bit harder to do that. So, and that's the nature of competition. So I think the main difference is that there's just so many more people doing it now, um, and everybody's trying to make a buck, whether it's a side job, something they do as a hobby that they're just trying to make a few extra bucks a month on, or if they're trying to go all in and do it as a full time job. There's so many different people that are out there doing it, and so I think that would be the main difference between videos that I'm making now and videos that I made back then. Um, there's just so many different things out there, and I'm having to, and my life has changed as well. So I'm trying to figure out how I can get all of the other stuff that I have to get done during the day, being kind of a stay at home dad, that I'm working from home. Um, be having the flexibility to run to the to run and take the kids to school, or if they get sick, to go and pick them up, and doctor appointments, and running to the grocery store, doing the laundry, all those other kinds of things that are just things that you have to get done, and having that flexibility, but then trying to put at least 8 hours a day in, doing the job. And that's why I'm one of the reasons why I'm doing a lot more live content, because I find it's really hard to put the editing time into it, and still have the time to go to concerts and football games and color guard performances and all of this other kind of stuff. Um, so I'm very happy to try to be moving into the live video realm a little bit more, so that I can more easily, I guess, find and keep all of the time that I need for all of that other stuff. So the main difference to me, just to reiterate, is that it's a much tighter market now. It's a much more full market now than it used to be. So you have to really kind of do something. I wouldn't say spectacular, but you need to do something unique. Whereas before, it maybe was less unique and more just groundbreaking at that point.
Yeah, I think that applies also to the games themselves.
Mm. Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, I think so. Um, I think you were still at the Dice Tower when there was this curious, I would say, segment called "Tom is Wrong."
Yeah.
Yeah, you were still there. Now
Yep.
that we keep seeing you doing videos with Jesse and Jesse, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and that I think I can speak for a lot of people that we agree with their choices. Do you think it's time for doing the segment "Sam is wrong"?
that would be that would be interesting. I think that would be something fun to do. I think with JT, my buddy, and Jesse, my wife, I think they both would have a great time picking apart and explaining why I'm wrong about whatever it is that we might be talking about. But I think in their own right, Jesse's a lot nicer than JT would be, but JT and I would just give each other trouble all the time anyway, so it's okay. Um, but yeah, JT would not have a problem telling me I'm wrong about something. That's for sure. Jesse would probably be much more nice about it, just because that's the kind of person she is. She's very sweet. Um, but yeah, that might be something we would look at. But again, I don't want to get caught up in a copyright infringement. Um, and no, that wouldn't happen. But it's funny. That's a neat idea. We'll think about that.
Okay, so you have been playing games for what, 30 years, or yeah,
Yeah, yeah, they're
almost
about.
30 years,
Hmm.
and you've been connected to the community for a long time also. What do you feel are the biggest differences between then and now? I mean,
Mm,
concerning the board gaming universe.
right. Well, I think first and foremost, I think board games are much more of a mainstream activity now than they ever were. Um, I think back 30 years ago, if you were a board gamer, or a gamer of any kind, really, you were, you know, the term geek or nerd was thrown out
Yeah.
there in a defamatory way. It
Mhm.
wasn't a compliment. It wasn't, a nice thing to say. It was something that was thrown at you as, you're kind of a lower form of humanity at that point. And that might be putting it too heavily. I don't know. But the idea is that I think there are many more people out there um, who are willing to say that they enjoy playing board games than there were back 30 years ago. And that leads itself to, or lends the community to, an idea, a more stronger idea of inclusivity. There's a lot more people that call themselves a gamer now than there used to be, and I think that's the largest and biggest difference between then and now. That's not to say that I think that there are more people who game than there were back then. I just think that people are more comfortable now saying that they are gamers than they ever were 30 years ago. Which is another reason why I think the market for video content and for audio content is so tight and so packed, because you have a lot of people that are willing to share their experiences with board games and with gaming in general than they ever were in the past. And then I think that's because the the uh, the the cultural climate has changed such that gaming is not just for nerds. It's not just for geeks. It's not just for um, you know people who don't have friends. It's the exact opposite. People enjoy gaming because they enjoy doing things with their friends, um, and even solo gamers that enjoy playing games also, and in a solo way, like video gamers do, and all that kind of stuff. Those people are also much more open now than they ever than I guess they ever thought that they could be. So I think that's really the biggest difference between then and now, is the fact that I think the community is it's so much more visible, if I can put it that way, than they were 30 years ago. When you have professional football teams uh, coming public and saying, "Yeah, we like to play Catan," in between our practices or whatever, back in the locker room, that's something that says something, because it breaks down that wall between jock and nerd. That's, oh, okay, well, we're just people who like to play games just like they are. They're not necessarily just that group, and we're not necessarily just this group. There can be an overlap now, and that's come to light. And I think that's a really cool thing.
It's accepted, socially accepted today.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It,
That's
it's
it's a much more pithy way to say it than all of that gobbledygook that I just gave you. Yes, that's correct.
it's funny that today, exactly today, happened something that you made me remember now.
Mm,
I have a high school friend, and we have been apart for many years. He
mhm,
was one of my best friends in high school,
yeah,
and recently we reconnected. And this morning we went for a coffee before work,
that's cool.
and we were just talking about games and stuff. And this is the kind of person, I don't know. I never really thought about it, but most people that I know and that I meet, they know the classics. They don't know modern board games. And we
Right.
were talking about that, and he was just saying, I play those games that everybody knows, Catan, and this, and I thought this is changing at that
Yeah,
moment, because I was expecting chess, Monopoly, or Clue, or
sure.
something like that.
Yeah,
So the fact that people assume that, I mean, regular people, not regular gamers, assume that Catan is the reference. It means that something. I mean, we probably are doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I totally agree with that, and that is a cool thing because it does kinda show, the shift. It's not, there's the people that are, like, they've made T-shirts now that says, "No, not like Monopoly," and it's like, that's the idea. Even in I mean, the people who say, "Oh, you mean games like Monopoly?" Even they are being, and I don't want to use this word too heavily because I don't want to be overbearing with it, but even they're being educated on a much slower basis that, well, yeah, Monopoly has its place in history,
Mhm.
um, but the games that are coming out now are much better than Monopoly. That's not necessarily to say that Monopoly is a bad game for people who enjoy that, but
Mhm.
from a subjectively mechanical point of view, there are many more games out there that are much better than, um, that have better mechanisms than Monopoly does, and some of the games still use some of those mechanisms that Monopoly used. So it's not to say that they're necessarily bad, but the way that the community and the culture now is kind of catching up to recognizing names like Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride
Yeah.
and Telestrations and Apples to Apples and stuff like that. Those are old games to us as gamers, but to them, it's like, oh yeah, I played this new game the other day, and it's like they're not necessarily talking about Monopoly and chess and checkers and all of those games that are tried and true classics. Don't get me wrong, but they're starting to get into this new age, so to speak, of board games that have those modern mechanisms, and really they're the beginners. They're the trailblazers for those new mechanisms. But even Pandemic, I think, in some of the circles that are up here, Pandemic falls into that category now of
Yeah.
Catan, Pandemic, Ticket to Ride, and that's a really cool thing as well. So it is really much more of a thing where I think, because the hobby is so much more visible now than it is, and it really has a different face than it used to as well. If you
Yeah.
talked about a game store 30 years ago, you very much were talking about that one store in the strip mall that looks like a cave, and I don't want to send my kids in there because it's too dark, and it's
Yeah.
got some creepy dudes sitting behind the counter, and it very much used to be that way, but now it's not anymore. You talk about a game store like Zulu's or Mox's Boarding House or Night Watch Games in San Antonio, Texas, or I was just at one in Philly called the Queen and Rook Cafe that is just super tied to the history of the city. The food was amazing. The ambiance was there. They had, just so much going for it. That's kind of becoming the norm. And that's a super good thing for the community because, you don't have to be, um, the oh, how can I say it? The view, the perception is no longer you're the weird guy. The perception now is okay, you enjoy playing board games. That's different,
Yep.
but it's not weird anymore. And
Yeah.
that's the cool thing, I think.
I think it relates also with the evolution of pop culture.
Sure.
Because I always remember this example in 2001 or 2
Hmm.
when the first Spider-Man, the movie came out
Yeah.
with Tobey Maguire.
Yep.
Before that, superhero movies, aside from the Christopher Reeve Superman,
Sure.
uh, superhero movies were for nerds and for geeks.
Yeah.
And y- and now it's like the basis of Hollywood.
Right.
The,
Yeah. I mean, the Avengers and all of, I think I can't remember exactly how, but it's something like 20 movies. or more than that. Actually, I don't
More,
remember
more, more for
exactly.
sure.
There's like there's so many movies that have come over the last 10 years
Yeah.
that really
Mhm.
are the mainstream action movies of the day,
Yeah.
and they're all about comic book characters. And it's like, you know, 30 years ago, no one would have ever. I mean, if
No.
you talked about the Captain America that was available 30 years ago, nobody wanted to talk
No.
about Captain America because that dude
Or
looked like,
Iron Man.
yeah, or Iron Man. Yeah, exactly. It's just like nobody the what was available. The old Captain America movie that was like made back in the 70s is nasty looking. I mean, and again, a lot of that is because of the technology that has come out and
Yeah,
how
of course.
good you can make things work and the progression that's been made and the costumes and makeup and all of that kind of stuff. There's so many other reasons why, but
Yeah,
the
of course.
fact that it's so mainstream now is really what's a big thing that's fueling the board game hobby.
Yeah, I think the geeks from back in the day, from 20, 30 years ago, are now
Yep.
the mainstream, are now the older people who
Sure.
can actually who are actually spending money on movies and music
Hmm.
and games and so on.
Yeah.
So I think it it applies a lot to board games also.
Sure.
And it's funny that you were saying before, you were talking about all those spaces, all those board game stores and cafes and so on. Right now we can find, I mean, for sure in a different dimension in the US than in Portugal, which has a very very small market, but still in Portugal we can find many board game cafes, and in many cities we can find different board gaming groups who are actually not only the geek guys.
Yeah.
Everyone is showing up, kids,
Hmm.
families, older people. My parents are almost 80 and they are playing board games every single day.
That's cool.
Yeah. And
That's very
so I think the fact that um, so many different there are so many different places to play, um, and so many different games, of course.
yeah.
uh, it allows people to show up and feel normal playing games,
Exactly.
and of course
Exactly.
in the end that eventually becomes a full circle, because then it makes people buy games, which allows publishers to make more games,
Yep.
and so on and
And
so
so
on
on
and
and
so
so forth.
forth.
Yep, that's exactly correct. Yeah, that's perfect. And we're actually starting this weekend on Friday. We're doing our first board game night at a local um, coffee shop that's here in town, and we're super looking forward to it. And the owner, I was just talking to her this morning. She's looking forward to it. And she's talking about, hey, we talked about doing this and doing that, but how about what if we do this too? Because she wants to try to make money doing it as well. And I think that's one of the things that we're not charging any money for us to do the board game night. We're just working with the owner of this coffee shop to um, provide an evening where people can come and play board games. And the only thing that we're charging is if you want to buy something from the coffee shop's drink menu or pastries or something like that, then absolutely do that. But you don't have to. You can just show up and play some games and all that kind of stuff. And we're super excited about that because we're going to be able to start doing it every month on a consistent basis, and we're really hoping that it grows and blossoms not only for us in the community, but it's another way for that person to make that owner to make more money than on at a time where they might not be making money. So
Yeah.
it's a cool thing, and it's a way to grow the community, and that's why we're doing it. We want to try to grow the community here in town. So we're super looking forward to it. But that's exactly what it is. You're just providing, the people that come to our board game night are We started doing it with our church about a year and a half ago, and our church is so busy right now, and our facilities at church are being used by so many different groups. It's hard for us to be consistent on a monthly basis. So that's one of the reasons why we're stepping out and doing it on doing it at a coffee shop. But the people that come are they span anywhere from like middle school aged all the way up to grandparents, and it's super cool. Any night we usually have anywhere from 30, anywhere from 25 to 35 people, depending on the night, depending on when, people are out of town doing stuff. But to have that size group with that many different demographics in it, I think it's great.
I think we can also see that on conventions.
Hmm.
We I I might be wrong, so you may correct me if I'm wrong. But 20 years ago, when we thought about the word convention, at least to me, it would come like the idea of trackies, you know,
Yeah.
those guys who are really into that subject, very much into that subject. And now you can see casual gamers coming to conventions.
Sure.
Um, People who just go there to play one or two games and talk a little bit and chat and see what's there, what's
Yeah.
going on, and then leave. Um, it's really a different environment. At least here in Portugal, we
Yeah.
already have a few a few big conventions, and I mean big for the Portuguese environment again, and with a few thousand people, which is not to say,
That's not small. That's pretty good
yeah,
size.
yeah, and a lot of people are casual people who are just
Hmm.
walking by, or they know from other friends about the conventions and they pay to get in. In
Hmm.
some conventions they have to pay, and they pay and they stay, and sometimes they stay more than one day actually,
Hmm. Yeah.
um,
I
which
think
I
I think I think that's
go ahead.
definitely an accurate statement. You have a lot more people that are interested in what's going on at a convention, whereas before it used to be just the hardcore fans of whatever genre was being conventioned, if I can say it that way. But yeah, you do have a lot of people. You also have a lot of parents that are now bringing their kids,
Yeah,
whereas it used to not be. Well, I don't feel safe bringing my kids to the convention, but now you definitely have that being seen. You have, and you like at PAX Unplugged, I definitely saw the family where it definitely looked like the dad or the mom was bringing the rest of their family, and the rest of the family didn't really want to be there, but they were still there to support mom or dad. And then I also saw, and I think I probably saw more of these, I saw families that were there where all of them were invested. They were all there. Maybe they were all there for different reasons, but all of the reasons had something to do with the convention. Maybe it was a tournament that was going on. Maybe it was a certain product or a certain game that they wanted to come check out. But I did definitely see whole family units that were there as a unit because they all had an interest in what was going on. Yeah, there was the other group that, you could tell that the family was being drug along. But I think it starts that way, right? It starts that way where the mom or the dad kind of pulls everybody else into it, and they're like, I really don't want to do it. And then at the end of the day, they're like, oh, that was fun, that was great. Can we do it next year? That kind of stuff. So it always starts like that. But I definitely saw a lot of different families and groups of people that were there from all different walks of life, and they were all there because they were interested in what was going on. And I think that's great. I think that's great for the hobby.
which games are you using to attract? I mean, imagine you have your game night, and
Mhm.
there's this new group that comes. They don't know really much about games. They
Sure.
heard about it, and maybe it's fun, maybe it's not. Which games do you put on the table to get these people to come back?
Honestly, the kinds of games that I usually come back to more often than not um, are cooperative games or party games. And a cooperative party game seems to be those kinds of games that are really the most popular. Um, and everybody has to, everybody's gateway experience is different than everybody else's, because that breaks down to our personality and who we are. Um, and I'm not going to like the same games, or I'm not going to want the same experiences necessarily that you would, and vice versa. So there isn't, in my opinion, in my estimation at least, there isn't a singular game that I think is the best for any one type of situation. When I was up in Calgary, that was actually the topic of the top 5 list that myself and 4 other content creators did while we were there. It was the top 5 go-to games for new gamers. And we all had, there were 5 of us, and I think there were only 2 crossovers um, uh, between 2 different sets of people. There was not one game that was on all of our lists. And you might say, well, that seems to be then that there isn't one best game for new gamers. And I think that's right. You really have to kind of gauge where that person is individually, or where that group of people is in a more corporate sense, and then determine what game you're going to show them. For me, it's been cooperative games, but in our gaming group, party games get played every single time at our game nights, and one of them is Telestrations. Another one is Just One. Um, we've played the game Silver and Gold a lot, which is just a real simple flip and write game. But generally speaking, but at the same time, there are people that bring a deck of cards, and the people that bring a deck of cards, they will teach me 5 different games with that one deck of cards. and and they're all fun. It's not like, but these are the games that they grew up with, and that's a really cool, efficient way to game. Is just, you need a deck of 52 playing cards, and you can play 10 different games with that one card. So we do a lot of those. Me specifically, though, I would usually, if we're talking about a board game and not a party game, I'm looking for cooperative games more often than not, because I think pulling somebody new into a competitive situation where they're the only one maybe that doesn't know how to play the game, that's a really intimidating situation to ask somebody to put themselves into. But if we're pulling that same person into a cooperative situation where I'm not competing against you, we need to help each other to win, then I think that's a much more comfortable situation to pull that person into. So I think cooperative games are very fun. Now, it could be that at the end of that cooperative game, they look at me and say, wow, that was really fun, but I really wish we had been competing and not cooperating. And now at this point, I take that information. I say, okay, well, you want some competition? Let's move on to exhibit A or exhibit B. And that's what we'll play next, but that initial experience, I want it to be much more comfortable than immediately taking him to a game where I have to go for the throat in order to win, or they have to go for the throat in order to win. I think it's much better to start off with a cooperative game and see where we go after that.
What do you think? And now that we are approaching the end of the interview, what
Mm.
of the conversation? I would like to say conversation. I think it's better. What do you think for the next years are the biggest challenges for the
Mm.
industry? I mean,
Uh,
there are
wow.
so many games now coming
There
out
are,
every day.
yeah. JT and I, just a couple of days ago, we recorded our top 10 of 2022 and 2023. And on Board Game Geek's database, there are a little less than 4,800 different games, not including expansions, that have come out in 2022 and 2023. So in just the last 2 years, we have almost 10,000 games that have come out. That's staggering. And I'm wondering I'm wondering how that's happening. And I know that there's a lot of small publishers that are doing smaller games, and I get that. But there's no way that any one person and or even any one group of people, I think, that can play 4,800 games back to back. Um, I mean, I'm not a math whiz, but if you break that down to how many games you have to play daily just to get it, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like you have to stay up 24 hours a day for the entire year just to play each game once. And so it's just not sustainable, I think. But so I guess the hardest thing going forward, I think, is going to be maintaining that strong sense of community that I think we're that is being ushered in, maintaining that while at the same time managing the amount of glut that is in the industry right now. And by that I mean games that come out and are maybe played and they're produced, but they just don't have any staying power because they're not as unique as everybody thought they originally were. And so I think the hardest part for our industry is going to be how do we move into a more sustainable and less predatory mindset. And by predatory, I'm specifically talking about crowdfunding. Um, I don't have a problem with crowdfunding. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I don't think that crowdfunding, the way it's being used right now, at least, where you have a lot of the bigger companies that are making the bigger games, and that's where a lot of the crowdfunding money is going to. Crowdfunding used to be for the small guy, but it's been, I think, taken over by a lot of bigger players as more of a pre-order system. And I don't think that's what it should have been, and I don't think that's what it should be. I don't necessarily have a problem with it because I do believe that um, I think if you have an idea that people want, then they should be able to pay for it no matter how big your company is. So I'm not attacking crowdfunding on that basis. What I'm saying is that I think that's going to be the difficulty. And for crowdfunding to balance out a little bit along with retail spaces and brick and mortar stores, because frankly, Kickstarter isn't where communities go to play games. That's where they go to buy games. Well, how are you going to get more people into the hobby? Well, it's by playing games. Well, where do people play games? Well, at home. That's one of the places. But I think brick and mortar stores, board game cafes, board game shops, those kind of places that have a a place for people to sit down and learn how to play the game, or to sit or to join with other people that know how to play games. I think that's where the community is really going to continue to thrive. It's not with crowdfunding. So I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle that I think our hobby is going to have to learn how to weather and balance out with our retail shops, so that there can be a little bit more um, symbiosis there, and less competition between the retail stores, who are really, I think, the front line for our community, and those who are crowdfunding. I think there needs to be more symbiosis there, for our hobby to truly continue to grow.
Talking about your tastes, your personal tastes a little bit. Um, what is that game that you played, let's say 20 years ago, and you
Mhm.
still play today?
Hmm. Well, I don't know that it was
Willingly.
well, I don't know that it was 20 years ago, but I still played that game on a regular basis. I When I was at PAX Unplug, I played it once. when I was at Calgary Tabletop Game Day a couple of weeks before that. I played it 3 times. Um, so it's not quite 20 years old, I guess, but it's pretty close. That game, no, it's not close. I can't remember when it comes. See, I'm bad with numbers. So let me see if I can find out real quick. Um, because this is something that I need to know. Oh, there was a 1990 film about it, but let's see. 2015. Okay, so not quite 20 years. It was more like 7 years, 8 years ago. But so see, that's my thing. It feels like so much long ago. 20 years ago, we're talking 2002. That was before, I guess the closest one to that is that one right there, Memoir 44. I still play that on a regular basis. Not all the time. It's not like I pull it out every weekend, but um, it's a game that I can play with almost anybody because it's that simple to teach. And but at the same time, I don't force it on people because it does have that war aspect to it that a lot of people makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But my wife will play it with me. My kids will play it with me usually. Friends will play it with me, and it's just a great game. But I think it truly is for me. It truly is an evergreen. I don't think I'll ever get rid of it because it's just when you're talking about a historically themed game, it's the kind of game that never loses its relevance. You always can come back to it and say, this has a historical lesson to be learned here. And that's one of the reasons I think I still play it. But I think that came out in 2005. I want to say 2005, I think. So that's probably the closest one to 20 years that I still play on a regular basis.
Is there, I mean, for sure there is more than one, but I want you to try and think about the one experience playing board games that you always remember.
Mm,
It might have been 20 years ago, it might have been yesterday,
yeah.
but the one that you had so much fun or that you learned so much from it, or I don't know, for whatever reason.
Um, for me, the one that I think it's not one specific situation, but it was a number of different situations because I did grow up in the same town as my grandparents. And so I did get to spend a lot of time with them because my mom was in and out of the hospital. She had lupus. And so sometimes she had to, when she wasn't in the hospital, she had to go to dialysis to have her blood cleaned out. Um, and so there were a lot of times that I spent the day with my grandparents. And so during the day with my grandparents, that's when we did a lot of different things. But one of the things that we did was we played games. And the games that we played were, generally speaking, chess and checkers. Those were the two that really kind of stand out. Not as much chess, but definitely checkers was one that we played a lot. And there's a lot of fond memories with that game. And it's very, probably not the one that I would that everybody would expect for me to say, but I have a lot of memories playing games with my grandparents when I was a kid that opened that door later on. When for me, it wasn't ever. I don't ever remember thinking, who in the world plays board games? I never remember thinking that. Um, Even when I was really starting to play board games, it was always kind of a natural progression. Yeah, playing board games is a good way to spend time with other people. It's a good activity. It's a good social activity. So, but I think that comes back to how often I played games with my grandparents and with my parents when I was a kid because it just made sense to do that. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and pick checkers with my grandparents.
And I'm not going to ask you that's famous question. If you were in a desert island,
Ah,
which game would you have with you? But
if I were, right?
no,
Oh, okay.
no.
Here we go.
But if after, if when you die, okay, there is another life, and you can bring one game from this life to the next one.
Ah,
Which one would it be?
one game from this life to the next. Oh man. Um, I've got to look around here for a little bit because that is a good question. I guess I would want to say that it would probably be my number one game of all time. So that I would probably say Blood Rage is going to be the one that I want to take because I think that's what it has to do. It has to be that game that you enjoy the most, right? The one that if everything else is put aside, what game do you want to play in almost any situation? And really, Blood Rage is that game. I love teaching Blood Rage. I love seeing the aha moment in people's faces where they start to understand that, oh, wait, I can actually lose battles and still gain points. And that just kind of it's just a mind-blowing thing for them because usually you have to win in order to get points. And Blood Rage is one of those games that kind of breaks that facade. And so it's just one of those games that I love playing it. I love playing it competitively in the sense that if I'm playing it with a group of people that really know the game well, I can play it as you know as well as I know how to play it, and it's still really really fun. Um, but I can also play it in a teaching role where I'm teaching new people how to play it and showing them how the game kind of flexes its muscles and those kinds of things, and just seeing them enjoy it. I enjoy all different contexts that the game can be played in. So I think Blood Rage would be the one. Um, generally speaking.
Sam, I have no words to thank you and to tell you how much I appreciate having you here. It's been a long time since I did the last conversations with
Mhm.
other people that you might know.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, so I think it was the perfect way to come back to these conversations,
Well, I appreciate
and
you. I appreciate
it's really also fun to finally be able to have a normal chat with someone that I've been watching for such a long time, and I still do. And by the
yeah.
way, I will share here your page,
Thank
the
you.
flip side of board games. I will just
Yes.
yeah, it's visible now.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so yeah. Wait. You have a new logo. Tell us
Oh,
about it.
yes. Yes. I am super happy. Ricardo Ferreira did that for me, and just out of the blue, he just messaged me one day and said, "Hey, I made this for you. You can use it if you want to, and you can not use it if you don't want to." But he made that for me, and I cannot thank him enough. It's amazing. I nobody has looked at it so far and said, "Well, that's not that great." Everybody's been super liking it, and I couldn't thank him more. So I want to absolutely give him props for that. It's really kind of cool because just maybe 3 weeks before he contacted me, I was saying to my wife, because we just got some shirts made, and the old logo. We just got shirts made with the old logo, and I was like, man, shirts are like super comfortable, but man, that logo, because I made the logo, and I was just like, it was late at night, and I was half asleep, and I was like, that works. I like the colors. I like yeah, that works. Oh wait, maybe I should turn that flip side of board games upside down so that it's actually upside down and backwards. And that was the extent of my graphic design capability. And so we got the new shirts in, and they were super comfortable, and they still are. And I was like, but man, I need to work on that logo, and I really just need to get something out. Now we're gonna have to pay somebody to do it because I can't do it myself. And but we both were like, well, we just got to wait because we got to wait for some more money to come in before we can do that. And then just a few weeks later, I got that email from Ricardo, and it's just like it was a heaven send, and it looks amazing. And here's the thing: one of the cool things that I like about it is that sometimes when you um, contract somebody to do a logo for you, I feel like I would have gotten in the way too much, if that makes sense. But the way this came about, he was just able to come up with something based on our content, based on what he knew about me, and based on all of that. And he came up with something that was straight out of his professional, artistic mind. And my little bumbling self didn't get in the way. And he was able to come up with something that I think is totally awesome. And I had zero input on it. And I think that's the best thing about it.
Probably.
So,
And once again, thank you so much
thank you.
for showing here at the Curious Box. It's been a great pleasure.
I appreciate it. It's been a great time. Thank you, Pedro.
So it's been our first, the other side of board games, our first conversation since the last one a long, long time ago. I want to thank you all for being on that side. Please tell us what you think on the comments. It's down
Mhm.
here. It's easy. Just write whatever you want because, writing allows us to debate and to talk even more about board games. And this is why we are here at the Curious Box. And I'm sure that is why you are there on the other side of the screen. So don't forget, subscribe, like all those stuff. Also, don't forget the link for the flip side of board games is down there. Just go there and also subscribe and check out the videos. It's
Yep.
been a great pleasure having you all there. I will see you hopefully at a table close to you.
Very great.